Well, those people would be taking me out of context and doing it for their own particular political reasons. What I think I'm saying is very clear.
This interview says less about the Green Party and more about UK political journalism. It starts off focused on the election and real voter issues like the economy and the high street, but quickly shifts into old controversies that aren't really relevant to the current campaign. Scrutiny is important, but the problem is inconsistency in what gets treated as relevant depending on the politician. That raises a bigger question. Are interviews actually holding power to account, or just chasing the most dramatic moment?
Zack Polanski, thanks for talking to us today. Now, you're up here in Manchester, you're launching a campaign to revitalise the high street, you're riding a green wave, you're up 10 percentage points in the polls since the general election. What does success look like for you and the Greens in these May elections?
I really want to make sure we have our best election ever, which is no small feat. Actually, a couple of years ago, we won over 240 council seats, which was a huge success at that time. Despite the fact there's many less seats in play at this election, I still believe we'll beat that. Now, I might sound confident, but I also want to say I'm not complacent at all.
And what's the first duty of any Prime Minister?
To protect this country. I think that really is the first duty of any Prime Minister.
Keep the country safe.
Yeah.
And where do you stand on NATO then, the most important security alliance of the West?
I want us to create an alternative alliance to have that discussion.
So you want to leave NATO?
Not immediately. Once we've got that alternative alliance with our European neighbours, so we can ensure our military, our security, then to start working towards that alternative.
All right, let's put it on the wall. You would like to, you're holding the position you'd still like to leave NATO, even though that's not Green policy.
Well, the position is I want to create an alternative alliance. And
who's in the alternative alliance? Isn't all the NATO members already?
Well, the European countries. It's effectively building an alliance that
we've got one in NATO with the European countries.
But the problem is that Donald Trump and the United States disproportionately have.
And Donald Trump's not going to be the president of the United States forever, is he?
But he's the president right now, and as you've said,
So you're going to leave NATO in his second term?
Well, they've just launched an illegal and unpopular war. What would it take for us to go? It's time to start working with Donald Trump.
The reason I'm pressing you on this is that YouGov polling shows defence is by far your party's weakest issue. 57% of voters don't trust the Greens when it comes to defence. And I think you here saying that you think that the UK should leave NATO doesn't reassure people when you yourself said the most important thing of any Prime Minister is to protect the country.
Well, I push back on you gently and say that it's the role of the media to report accurately, and actually what I'm saying is not to leave NATO right now. I'm saying let's build an alternative alliance.
When do you want to leave NATO by?
Well, once we've built that alternative alliance, but we don't even start that conversation, and Keir Starmer has kind of had whispers of my same position, but doesn't seem to be taking any action to work with the European neighbours.
I've never heard Keir Starmer say that he thinks that we should transition to a different alliance from NATO. On the same theme, though, of leadership and some of the issues going on at the moment, you said on the horrific wave of anti-Semitic attacks, there's a conversation to be had about whether it's a perception of unsafety or whether it's actual unsafety, but neither are acceptable. But there's not a perception of unsafety, it's a real threat, right? Why did you say that?
Well, those people would be taking me out of context and doing it for their own particular political reasons. What I think I'm saying is very clear. They're both arsons, and dressing up an artificial image of a Jewish leader dressed as a Nazi is also unacceptable. One is actually making Jewish people unsafe, and one is a perception of unsafety I feel.
It might make you unsafe if it then motivates people to come and attack you.
For sure.
So why is that a perception? That is just making you potentially unsafe.
Because the motivation of someone attacking me personally is clearly my perception. I'm not yet unsafe. I might be if you know information that I don't, and then yes, I'd be unsafe. But I think it's important that we keep these things in perspective.
In perspective?
Yes.
Do you know how many anti-Semitic attacks and incidents were recorded in the UK in 2025?
Which is why I've said that all anti-Semitic attacks, whether it's unsafety or my perception, is... No, I don't know the number.
3,700. It's the largest ever on record, which is why words really matter, and perception of safety might alarm some people that you're not taking it seriously.
Well, I think as a Jewish man, most of your audience would expect I take anti-Semitism seriously, as I take all forms of hate crime seriously. And I think the public are hearing this conversation. It's bizarre to most of them. Of course, as a Jewish man, I care about anti-Semitism.
Okay, and I want to just come back to one other thing, and this is slightly awkward, but I'm going to raise it with you, because I want to come back to an article in a national newspaper that featured you in 2013 when you were a hypnotherapist, because I've read it a few times as part of my research. You told a Sun journalist you could increase the size of her boobs with hypnotherapy. You said, this is an extremely new approach, but I can see it becoming popular very quickly because it's so safe and a lot cheaper than a boob job. And I have to say, I read this article, I found it really weird. Like, why did you do that?
Yeah, the article's nonsense, and I've apologised for it several times, and I stick by that apology.
Why do you say the article's... I've got the quotes, I read it. There were direct quotes from you.
Because it was...
Was the article... Why are you saying the article's nonsense? You clearly did it, and then a few days later you went on the BBC radio and you repeated it.
Well, as I said, or you said, it was 13 years ago.
I know that. That's not what I'm asking. I found it weird. I want to understand why you did
and
it.
It definitely, it was the Sun journalist's idea, and I should have said no.
Yeah.
I wasn't a politician. I went along with the idea. I shouldn't have done that, and that's what I've apologised for, and stick by that apology.
So you regret doing it?
Oh, I mean, it's embarrassing.
Yeah. Also, just on women, I noticed you also changed your policy around sort of trying to discourage caesarean births as part of your some of your policy changes as well, right?
So that's an example of, because where we make Green Party policy is entirely democratic, sometimes policies go back to literally 1978, I think.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do is make sure we have a more ongoing conference policy process to make sure that the things we're saying are modern, based in science, on a public health approach.
Yeah. Just finally then, you don't think that women can increase their breast size through hypnotherapy, do you?
No, I don't.
Just to be clear. Okay. All right. Zack Polanski, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you
I
very much,
appreciate it. Thank you.
What this interview really exposes isn't just how Zack Polanski was questioned. It's how inconsistent political scrutiny in UK journalism can become when it drifts away from what voters actually need to hear. Because in principle, no politician should be shielded from tough questioning. Scrutiny is not the problem. The problem is what that scrutiny is focused on, and when. This interview starts in the right place: the election, the campaign, the high street, polling momentum. That's the real-world context voters are dealing with right now. But very quickly, the focus shifts away from present policy and into old controversies, recycled quotes, and issues that have already been addressed multiple times in public. And that feeds into a wider issue with parts of the UK media environment right now: inconsistency. Not necessarily bias in a simple sense, but an even application of what relevance looks like depending on who is being interviewed and what narrative is easiest to build in the moment. The consequence of that is not better accountability, it's confusion. It creates a political space where voters are given noise, not clarity. And in a period where trust in institutions is already under strain, that's not a small issue. Britain is facing structural challenges that actually require sustained political attention: NHS capacity, economic inequality, housing pressure, and long-term fiscal stability. Those are the questions that deserve to sit at the centre of every serious political interview. So the real takeaway here isn't about one journalist or one politician. It's about standards. If political journalism is going to serve the public properly, scrutiny has to stay anchored to what matters now, not what creates the easiest detour, because without that discipline, accountability stops being informative and starts becoming distraction, and at a time when the country needs clarity more than ever. That's a risk we can't really afford, and that matters, because UK voters are not making decisions based on 10-year-old headlines. They're dealing with the NHS under pressure, persistent cost of living issues, stretched local services, and long-term economic uncertainty shaped by years of policy decisions, particularly under Conservative governments. So when interviews move away from those pressing realities and instead prioritise historical digressions, something important gets lost: relevance. Now, to be clear, this isn't about giving any politician an easy ride. If someone is standing for a national office, their record, their positions, and their credibility should absolutely be tested. That includes difficult questions on defence, international alliances, and policy consistency. But there's a difference between accountability and distraction, between scrutiny and excavation for the sake of a moment, and that distinction becomes even more important when you compare how different political figures are treated in different contexts. Because what often matters is not just how hard someone is questioned, but what they are questioned about, and whether that line of questioning actually reflects the choices voters are being asked to make at the ballot box. When interviews drift into outdated controversies instead of current policy, it doesn't strengthen democracy. It risks distorting it, because it encourages audiences to focus on personality history instead of present-day political impact.